And so in this video I'm going to show you how to make a lovely willow butterfly which will adorn any garden. What you need to make the willow butterfly are 4 long rods and a bunch of small rods for weaving. Now we check the longest of the short rods and we form it into a loop, leaving a couple of inches of the thick or butt end sticking out and holding on to the junction of where they meet. We take the rest of the rod and we start to weave it inside the loop, across to the other side, around that side, into the loop, in a figure of 8 motion. Now as we weave up, the loop gets closed in, and therefore we have to try to keep it as roundish as possible. But we keep feeding the weaving part into the hole, round the side, into the hole and around the other side, until that rod is spent. Then we introduce one of the small weaving rods. From underneath we put the thick end up and we hold it on the other side. Then we bring it around into the center and around and continue the figure of 8 motion until that rod is spent. Now I have different coloured willow rods here, so I'm choosing bands of different colours, but we work with what we've got. And so we continue on up the wing until we get to the last one. Introduce it as before. This time we're feeding the tip into the hole as we can't fold the rod in. And slowly the hole fills. We're trying to keep the hole as big as possible for as long as possible, so that the weaving is nicely packed in there. So if you can, keep squeezing a hole out and feeding the tip in. Until you can feed it in no longer. I could just get one last one out. And once you've woven to the top, trim off the hairy bits. And there we have the first wing. Now, for this butterfly we need 2 big wings at the top and 2 smaller ones at the bottom. So the second hoop has to be roughly the same size as the first one. Now you can see how much the first one has been squished in with the weaving. So it's a rough approximation of that size. And then we weave as before, taking the tail end, weaving it inside, around the other side, and so on. Now, the third wing, which is going to be one of the smaller ones, needs to be noticeably smaller than the upper wings. Maybe 3/4 of the size. And we continue as before, weaving the tail end into the hoop, around the other side, back into the hoop. Now, when both wings are made, we're going to join the bottom ones together by pointing the thick end of one and feeding it into a hole in the other, so that the thick ends can be joined together. We do the same with the upper wings. And so now the butterfly is ready to be put together. Now for the body of the butterfly, we're going to take our 4 long rods, hold them together and tie them together using a willow rod, where we point the thick end up the body, then we turn on its side and pinch with our thumb as we take the tail end and start to wrap around 4 rods. And in doing so, we wrap around the thick end of the rod. So in effect, we're weaving up the body and over the butt end of this rod. Now, it's a little bit fiddly, but it's just a bit of fun. So we keep weaving, and somewhere when you get near the end of that rod, we'll tuck it behind the thick end, back around over the top, and then that's strong enough to hold it. And then feed it behind one of the 4 stalks, and that should hold it. Now we're ready for the lower set of wings. So we have to create a space by separating the 4 into 2 pairs. We create a crevice into which we place the lower wings, and we squeeze them down. And then when you squeeze above, they're viced together. And using one of the small weaving rods, we're going to fix these wings to the body. So I've found a crisscross weave to be quite useful. We come across the front of the body each time. We make sure as well that we join the 2 wings together by weaving around their thick ends. And then we finish off feeding the tip in behind one of the uprights just to hold it in place. And now we're ready for the upper wings. So again, they go the other way, pointing upwards. There's a thick end I need to cut off. So they point upwards. And now it's at a delicate point until these wings are tied in as well. So using another willow rod, I'm going to start to crisscross these wings into position. And so we wrap across and around as much as possible. We can't wrap enough, really. So to try to secure these wings onto the stalks as best as possible. When we get to the end of the rod, we feed it in to a gap somewhere and pull it through. And that's more or less the butterfly complete. After a little trimming, we can keep wrapping our body as much as possible, which keeps the wings in place. I think at least one more rod will do it. And it gives us good secure fixing for the wings. And it also bulks the body up a bit. So again, when we get to our tips, we feed it into a gap somewhere. Now we've used 4 rods, and obviously this butterfly has 4 antennae, but we can finish these off whatever way we want. I just trim them slightly shorter, maybe spread them out a bit. If we point the bottom of these stalks, we can push it into the ground and it slowly sways with the flexible willow on a windy day.